Imperium is a deck-building worker placement game for 1 to 4 players based on the legacy of the Frank Herbert novel Dune. Now, I have not read Dune, nor have I seen the original film, but from playing this game, I am kind of intrigued by the new film, Legendary Pictures. Now, this game does borrow a lot of artwork and themes from the new film coming out, so you will see some recurring characters from the upcoming films, such as Josh Brolin and Jason Momoa and Zendaya. This is a worker placement deck management game, which focuses heavy on resource management. So this is a competitive game for 1 to 4 players. You'll be placing workers across your turn, building your deck as you play along, using your leader's specific unique powers to conquer the Imperium and gain victory points and win. Now, I heard this game had quite high reviews, and I'm going to be honest, from looking at the back of the game, I wasn't too intrigued. It just seemed a little bit bland for my taste. The board looked pretty bland. I didn't know much about Dune going into this. And I just thought another work placement game and deck building, I wasn't really going to be much for this, but I was actually quite surprised at the game itself. So we're going to delve in now to the contents of the game, setup, and the phases and mechanics for my final thoughts section. So let's unbox and look at the contents inside Dune Imperium. So underneath we have the instruction manual with a nice artwork of the Shai-Hulud sandworm. We also have a sheet for the solo play rules and a quick reference guide for the symbols on the board. Next we have the game board itself. So the game has no insert, but it does have these little dividers here so you can separate things, and they just come with a lot of these little bags to put your tokens in. We have 18 conflict cards. Now these are placed on the board. There are 10 of these. These act as sort of a clock for the game, and they also give you goals to proceed. So for instance, this one here tells me that if I come first this round I gain 2 victory points and I ban it on a certain location. If I come second I get 5 of the spice, and third I get 3 spice. And these change, and there's a stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3 of the goals. Stage 3 ones do have higher endgame bonus rewards as compared to the stage 1. So obviously towards the end of the game you're going to want to get more rewards to see who wins. We have 40 of these small intrigue cards, and these are given out as rewards for certain activities. There are 3 types. There are combat, plot, and endgame. These are played during certain times. So combat obviously are played during combat. They can give you certain things like extra effects when you win, more defense for your troops or retreat troops. Plot ones can be played at any point. It can bring certain effects such as gain rewards, gain increase in factions, draw cards. And endgame ones you keep, and at the end of the game you get extra bonuses depending on if you fulfilled the requirements on the card. So we have 67 Imperial cards. We have 3 sets of cards for the reserve. These are always kept face up and can be brought by any player at any time. We have the player's starting cards, you get 10 cards to start off with, and a regular big old deck of cards. At the start of the game you'll place 5 out, and that'll make up your Imperial row. Think of that as like your marketplace where you can buy cards from in the future. Each card has a cost or a symbol in the corner, a list of symbols to the left, an effect in grey, and sort of effect at the bottom down here. To go through briefly, the cost at the top right is the cost of the card. The symbols on the bottom left relate to the map, which I'll explain later on. Tell you where you can use these to place your markers to generate resources and do certain effects. The grey effect is played immediately when you play the card, and the bottom effect is used on your reveal turn phase to gain extra influence, resources, and other certain effects. For instance, Stilgar here tells me that it costs 5 to buy this guy. When I buy him, it goes to my discard pile. If I want to play this card, I can use this card to send one of my markers to any of the symbols matching those on the map. I'll also gain 1 water token. If I don't use this card in the marker phase, in the reveal phase, I can use this card later to gain 2 influence, which is used to buy cards, and gain 3 extra combat stats to my attack when I'm playing the combat mode. Each player also gets their own set of 10 cards. You can tell they're the starting cards by the little arrow symbol next to there. The variety of symbols and effects on them. As you play through the game, you'll buy new cards, get rid of the cards out of your deck, and generally get a stronger, better deck towards the later half of the game. And there's a large number of cards in this game, a huge variety of cards. Some cards, I've done about 20 playthroughs of this game, I've only seen so many cards so many times. I'll see cards now and I think, oh, I've seen that card before, well, oh, that's a new card, or oh, that's something different. Which really great, makes the game more replayable. You want to keep playing, find these extra cards, these extra things you haven't seen yet, what extra combinations you can try. But there's no real bad cards in Dune. No card is bad. Every card you get is useful. It makes you think on the fly what you want to do, because things will change as you play. We also get 8 of the leader cards, which are double-sided with a turn sequence on the back, which is really helpful for new players. As I said before, this game is based on the upcoming Dune movie, so I don't really know much about the characters, but the artwork is based on the likeness of his characters, so you'll see actors like Dave Bautista, Zendaya, Jason Momoa, Josh Brolin pop up occasionally, and you'll think, oh, that's Josh Brolin, oh, that's Zendaya, as you play along the cards. Each character has a different number next to them, between 1, 2 and 3, indicating the complexity of the character, so it's a good idea to give new players characters like Paul Atreides with one star or one symbol next to him. More experienced players can play someone like Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, who's a little bit more challenging character to play. Not necessarily better than the others, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. It's just the ones with less of these symbols are easy to use. Each character also has a special symbol down here, an active power. So for instance, Earl Memon Thorvald says when you take a high seat council, you gain extra influence in one of the factions. And the symbol here is their signet ring power. When you play a signet ring card, what you saw in the starting deck, you'll trigger their signet ring power. So if I play a signet ring card, I'll gain 1 of the spice. If I play a signet ring card, I gain 1 water, I gain 1 of the Stellaris. We also get tokens for water, tokens for Solaris, and tokens for spice. These are all basically forms of currency in the game. Water requires you for certain areas across the desert to travel. Solaris is mostly used to buy more troops and proceed in the Emperor faction. And spice is used in the Spacing Guild faction and also to recruit certain effects. You can also transfer spice for Solaris at certain points on the board game. We have 3 sets of markers, 1 for each colour. There's 4 colours. Also the Mentat black marker there. Markers are essentially like your workers. You'll use these to place them out. Each player gets 2 stock off the game with. You can acquire 1 later on by placing a worker on the Swordmaster space. We also get little tokens for the troops, and 1 of each colour. These represent your troops, your forces, your armies as you battle for the Imperium. You'll place these in the garrison, on the board, or in the combat zone. And also we also get these little markers for each colour. These are used to track your score, and also when you take a seat in the High Council. I'll explain these terms later on in the game as you play through. Also have the faction tiles, 1 for each faction. When a player reaches so far on the tile track, they'll gain 1 of these, gain a reward. If they do get overtaken by someone else, they'll lose 1 and lose their victory point as well. These are the Baron Harkonnen tokens for use with the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen leader, for his card, his effects. There's also a banner, 3 of each, 1 for each colour, for each player. These are used when you place them on certain locations, when you achieve certain victories, and you can use these later on to gain rewards, gain Solaris if someone lands on a space of your banner. And also a combat marker, 1 for each colour, 1 for each player. These are used to track your combat strength when using the combat section of the game. This tells you who wins the combat, the highest number on the board wins. And lastly, we also get the House Hagel cards, or Hagel, I can't say this. These are used in the 1-player and 2-player games. There's a set for the 1-player, as the 1p symbol there, and a few for use in the 2-player only version of the game, and some generic ones. These are placed when you want to play solo or 2-player, and the act is basically an AI for the other player. You flip it over, it'll tell you where to send their marker, or effects to do. So this one here tells me I've got to send a marker to the Arcan space, tells me that I get a troop for that colour, and also activates their leader's signet power. And also you can flip one over during combat, and you can add the total to their combat value, making combat quite unpredictable and quite challenging for the game. And that's it for the game components. So I'm going to show you how to set up the game board now, where the tokens go, and explain the mechanics and the phases of the game. Okay, here's the board for Dune Imperium, set up for a 3-player game among the gold, blue and green players. There's a lot to take in here. It's quite a mess of tokens and tiles and bits everywhere, but really it's quite simple because everything you need is listed on the board. All the rewards you get are right there, so there's not much confusion. Once you get the hang of how the combat, the drawing, the troops work and the factions, that's pretty much the bulk of the game itself. But let's go through this as much as I can briefly. So for starters, we have a nice handy round tracker down here, tells where the phases we're on. We have the round start, player turns, combat, makers and recall, which is always handy for new players to tell what phase they're on. This down here is the combat track and the garrison conflict zone. Along the way you'll place troops in the garrison here, so other players can see how many troops you've got, and then you'll gradually push troops into the combat. In the combat phase you'll fight, use your cards and abilities, and use your little markers down here to track your progress on the combat track. Whoever has the highest score wins the round. This along the right down here, and these symbols are the victory track. Along the way you'll get victory points. The first player to hit 10 wins. When the conflict deck expires, the game is over and the highest score wins. The conflict deck is done by taking one level 1 card, 4 level 2 cards randomly, and 5 of the level 3 cards placed in order. You flip a card over, and it'll tell you the victory and rewards for coming first, second or third in the combat phase of each round. When the round's over, the next one is flipped, and so forth. When it runs out, the game is over. So this one down here tells me that the player who comes in first in the combat will gain an increase to one of the factions, and also 2 of the Solaris, one of the currencies. Second, you'll gain 3 Solaris, and 2 you'll gain 2 Solaris. If a player ties for first, they both get second. If 2 players tie for second, they both get third. And people can't tie for third. So it's quite challenging. It's pretty interesting because this will change as you go along. There'll be more rewards. So one round you might be doing so well, you might have a lot of troops out, you're thinking, I can't win this round. Doesn't matter, you might think, it's okay, I can go for the next round. I can just focus on gaining more cards or working on my factions this turn instead. Which is really good because you have different ways of winning the game, different strategies you can think on the fly as you go along. Next up we have the faction and the guilds. So left up here we have the Fremen, the Bene Gesserit, the Spacing Guild, and the Emperor Guilds. Each one has a different symbol and different colour next to it. We have a track along here for each of our cubes. As you play cards and send your workers to these spaces down here, you'll increase along the tracks. When you get halfway, you gain a victory point with your marker up. When you hit the top part of the top 3 spaces, you'll gain the reward listed here, so a water, a intrigue card, 3 Solaris, or you see at the top up there, 2 troops, and you'll also gain this token. We'll explain how the factions work later on. Also we have some more spaces. We have spaces in the open area up here. We have each space has a symbol, the top left, so it has a sort of golden triangle, a blue circle, a green symbol, and also the symbols here. These all relate to the cards you have in your hand. For instance down here, certain cards match. You can only send a marker by playing a card. If you don't have the matching symbol, you can't send the characters here. So for instance, I couldn't use this card to send my markers to one of these spaces because it's not on the card. I could, however, send my character to any of these spaces on the left, the guild spaces. Some spaces also have a cost. So not only do you need to play a card, send your marker over, but you need to pay a certain cost. So for instance, the Imperial Basin is no cost at all, it just requires you to play a card in a matching triangle. But to go to the Haga Basin, I'm required to pay 1 water. The Great Flat requires 2 water. The same up here. These are 3. This one requires 2 water. This one, we see there, requires to have at least 2 influence in the Fremen Guild. To the right of the symbols tells you the rewards. If a location has a crossed sword symbol, that means when you gain troops from that symbol, you can place them straight into the conflict, and also up to 2 troops from your garrison as well. So if you want to go for combat one round, make sure you go for the spaces with the crossed sword symbols. If you go to a space without a symbol on, for instance, if I went to the secret space here, there's no crossed swords, I could not put troops into this zone. Also, this space here, for instance, has a siege sword symbol, but no troops. I wouldn't get any troops from going there, but if I had troops in my reserve, I could place them into the combat. Also to the right, we have rewards listed here. So for instance, this one here gives me 1 troop, 1 water. This gains me 3 cards from my deck, and so forth. And there's a handy little reference back of the guide tells you what each symbol means, but it's quite simple, there isn't that many really to go through. And after a game or 2, you'll memorise them all pretty quickly. We also have space in the Cheum up here, or Cheum, I can't say it. Basically these give you Solaris. This gives you 3 Solaris, so you exchange spies for Solaris. And also up here we have symbols for the High Council, Rally Troops, Swordmaster, and the Mentat. Also nearby, stack the intrigue cards, everyone can reach. Stack the reserve cards in 3 separate piles for all players to purchase from. Shuffle the rest of the Imperium cards and then deal 5 face down to make up the Imperial row. This acts as a marketplace for players to buy cards from. Anytime you buy a card, you immediately replace it with something else. Each player takes a character sheet, 2 markers. Each player does have 3 markers, but your last one is sort of locked on the board, and you must use the Swordmaster space and pay 8 Solaris to unlock your 3rd Swordmaster. Obviously, unlocking this gives you an extra marker, extra turns you can take. Also, the rest of their troops into their reinforcements. Now these aren't in the garrison, you can't freely move these into the combat, they have to be in the garrison first. Also, your remaining token there, this is used for the High Council. Your banners, for use on placing on certain locations, give you Solaris. And lastly, there's a first player cool little token there, goes to the first player. After the end of the round, pass it along and goes clockwise in that order. Also, each player gets 10 of the starting cards shuffled, placed to the left of their deck in their face down pile. And lastly, we all get one water token because we need water to survive. But this is it for the board setup. I'm going to go through each phase now and show you how the game plays. Phase 1 is round start. This round begins by filling a new conflict card onto the board, which we've already seen earlier. Then each player draws 5 cards from their own deck. If at any point your deck is empty, you immediately shuffle your discard pile to the left and make a new deck and continue drawing. So we draw 5 cards into our opening hand. This is probably the easiest phase, you just draw cards and reset the conflict deck. So, phase 2, player turns. There are 2 types of player turns. There's an agent turn and a reveal turn. Generally speaking, you'll play your agent turn first and then your reveal turn after, but you can, if you wish, not play any agents or play just one and save your reveal turn for later. It's because you'll have more cards to reveal in the second part, and I'll explain why in just a few moments. So, to send an agent across one of the spaces, you must first play a card with a matching symbol in the corner. These symbols to the left here indicate spaces on the board. There is the yellow triangle, the blue circle, the green symbol up here, and also a symbol matching each of the factions down here. So I could not use this card here to send one of my agents across to a space here, because the symbol there does not match. To send an agent, you'll play a card face up, take your agent marker, send it across to a matching symbol. If the symbol has a cost, like this one here, requires 2 water, and you haven't got that cost, you cannot send an agent there. So I'll send an agent to a space up here. When you send an agent there, you can do certain things. So first of all, if it has a slashed sword symbol on the icon picture, any troops you have in the garrison can be sent across into the conflict zone. Now you always send the required amount on here. So I gain a troop, I can send it straight to the combat zone if I wish. And I can also move up to 2 troops into the battlefield. So say, for instance, I had 4 troops in my garrison down here. I put my agent down here, I play the card, I gain a troop, and if I wish I could place it in the conflict or in my garrison. I'm going to put it in the conflict. Then I can push up to 2 troops from my garrison into the conflict. It's important to note that having troops in the garrison don't have to go into the conflict, but it's great having more there because it gives you more chance to push more out into combat. Also, it tells me to draw an intrigue card on the side there. Different spaces have many different rewards. I'll explain the rewards now. So, as the factions work, when you spend an appropriate card, send an agent to one of the faction spaces. If you pay the cost, pay the cost. You'll gain the rewards there like a regular space. You'll also move your faction cube up one of these slots along here. When you hit to the second point, you'll gain a victory point along here. If you hit the top 3 row up here, you'll immediately get a reward here, so a water, intrigue card, 3 Solaris, and so on. Also take the marker for yourself, gain 1 victory point, and keep hold of that. If someone overtakes you on this, the marker is placed back to them, you lose a point and they gain a point. So it's important to keep an eye on this track and see who's competing for the faction leaderboards. If you hit the stage 3 first, you can't be overtaken and you're safe for the rest of the game. All these factions have unique rewards. For instance, the Threadmen give you extra troops and water. The Bene Gesserit gives you intrigue cards and you can discard cards to draw cards. Spacing Guild gives you full space cards and even 5 troops and water. Full space cards are placed in reserve and you gain one of these. As you can see, these are great cards. They have a symbol for each symbol on the map. They also, when you play them, you get to draw a card and trash the card. Trash means to exile a card from the game, return it to the supply. So the spaces at the centre of the board have different effects, such as drawing cards, gaining water, gaining troops. This little banner symbol underneath means that when you succeed in a conflict and win a match, some conflict cards have symbols and you place your banner over there. When you place your banner on one of the spaces, the next time someone lands that space, they get an award listed there, so 1 spice. Doesn't matter who hits that space, you'll still gain the reward. The 3 desert spaces in the centre give you rewards such as spice, The little sandworm symbol here means that if there's not a marker here at the end of the turn, you place a spice here. These can rack up over time. Whoever hits there first gets a total spice combined with the spice printed on the board. The KM section gives you extra Solaris, so Secure Contract gives you 3 Solaris, and Sell Melange lets you sell spice for Solaris in return. Solaris is essential for getting certain guilds and certain spaces in the Landspan Council up here. So the whole oratory gives you influence and a troop. I'll explain influence in the next bit. Swordmaster, you pay 8 Solaris. Once per game, you gain your Swordmaster, you gain your 3rd worker, which is obviously really handy. Rally troops pay 4, gain 4 troops into the garrison. Supporters note there's no combat symbol there, so you couldn't put into combat, but it's still in the garrison, ready for later. The Mentat space lets you pay 2 and hire a Mentat. You hire this little black token here. Essentially acts as an extra 3rd worker, well, 4th if you have 3 workers, for the rest of the turn. And the High Council space is once per game, you can pay 5, send an agent here, and then you place your remaining circle marker in one of the slots. And then for the rest of the game, every time you go to the buying card phase, you'll gain an extra 2 influence every single turn. Okay, next up we have the reveal phase. Let's say everyone's gone round, they've had 2 cards, played 2 agents out, got their rewards. Now onto the reveal phase. This is when you have the cards that left in your hand. It's important to note the cards in your hand are for the reveal phase. Cards you played for agents don't matter anymore, they're gone. Any card left in your hand, the bottom symbols are counted up and added up. So anything in the little blue diamond symbol here counts as influence. Think of influence as currency for buying cards from the Imperial Row, the marketplace, as we saw earlier. You also add this to anything you got from the Hall of Oratory and anything from the High Council. Use this to take turns to buy cards. When you buy cards, add to the discard pile. Run out of cards, you shuffle up and draw new cards. So buying cards is really, really essential. Also, some cards have extra effects at the bottom. So it's this dagger down here means that I'll get an extra +1 to my combat, which I'll explain in a second on the combat phase. Once you've all done this and brought your cards, it's time for the combat round. So I'll explain how a combat round works. So example of combat. First of all, I'd add my dagger total to my combat dial down here. Next up, we add up the cubes in the centre. Now cubes are each worth 2 each. So the blue has 1, so that's 2 points. Now he has 4 troops to the garrison, but they aren't in the conflict, so they don't count, so be careful for that. The green has 3 troops, so that's 6 points for him. I also have 3 troops, but because of my dagger, I'm actually on 7. So as the round wins, the yellow player gains the first reward. They'll increase their faction and gain 2 Solaris, any faction of their choice. The second player, green, will gain 3 Solaris, and the third player, blue, will gain 2 Solaris. There is a reward for a 4th player. The next phase is simply the maker phase. This is where you add spice to the 3 slots here if there's not an agent there. If there's an agent there, you add no spice to it. This can build up over time. Like I said earlier, you can send an agent here to get extra spice. So it's handy to sit back and wait for these to build up, send an agent over, that's loads of spice. And finally, the last phase is the recall phase. All you do here is check everyone's won this round. With the victory points, you return the Mentat back to its space, return your agents back to your players, and rotate the first player token clockwise. And that is it for Dune Imperium, the setup and mechanics and phases. I'm going to go now to my final thoughts so you can see what I have to think on this game. So, final thoughts on Dune Imperium. What do I think? This game is a well-oiled machine. It's worker placement and deck management, but so fine-tuned, combined with the powers and the place on the board, it just works so well. The game is quite fast-paced. You constantly have to change on the fly your strategies and your formulas. Due to the deck building mechanics and the worker placement strategies and the factions and the many spaces on the board and the conflicts, you'll constantly have to change up your strategy and think, I can't go for this phase, I'm going to go next round, oh no, someone's blocking my space off, I've got to think fast what I'm going to do, I've got to change my mind, actually they're getting quite high, you look at the conflict card, oh no, there's 2 victory points, that player might win, I've got to focus all my efforts on the conflict and focus on the warring. I do like how you can see other players, their combat, their troop size first before you go into battle. It means that you haven't got to go into battle and waste all your troops on nothing, just completely get slaughtered. All the spaces are unique, there's a lot to choose from. There's 8 leaders, there's a ton of Imperium cards, and there's a lot of replayability in this game. The replay value is extremely high, and also for solo, it works really well for solo. It's one of the best solo games I've played in a long time. The house haggle card system works so well, and there's 3 difficulties, and each one gives the other AI player separate starting resources and troops in the garrison, which means that it can get increasingly difficult as you play along, which I find so great to play with. Playing on hard mode is brutally challenging, which is all just great fun for the game. So pros for the game is mechanically perfection. It's pretty simple, setup time is quite quick, it's very competitive, strategic, and heavy on the theme. The only cons for this game I can say are, apart from it being a little bit dull, the board itself, the troops are just sort of bland little coloured tokens. And if you don't really know much about Dune Imperium, Dune itself, you might not want to get this game. I mean, I was put off a little bit because I didn't know much about Dune myself, and I'm thinking, I don't want to play a game where it's based on an IP that I don't know, because, I mean, most things I have, I like, you know, anything to do with like Harry Potter or Marvel, straightforward. But for this, I wasn't really sure what I was going to get into. But not only has it surprised me and intrigued me, I'm actually looking forward to watching the film, and I've actually ordered the book for myself to read, so in a way, the game itself has sold extra by making me want to buy the book and go see the film. And that's it for my review of Dune Imperium. I give Dune Imperium a good, solid 9 out of 10. Fantastic game for any ages. Anyone interested in worker placements, competitive game, sci-fi, or fans of Dune itself, it is a really, really great game. The other game that came out last year, which is a sort of rebranding of the original 1979 game, I also have. That is a great game too, but it's very competitive, it's very like chess-like and strategic. It's a lot more complicated than this game. This game's a lot simpler to learn. And that's it for this review. Any questions about this game, any comments, you want to see a playthrough video or a more in-depth explanation of the turns or mechanics, let me know in the comments down below. Leave a like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.